Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we extract the core insight from dense foundational texts and historical research.
Our whole goal here is to give you a genuine shortcut to being well-informed, uncovering some of the, well, surprising facts that are often hidden in the details.
And today, we are opening up a particularly profound piece of legal history. This is one that concerns the very foundation of societal trust.
It really is. We're doing a deep dive into early Islamic jurisprudence, focusing on the concept of truth as a sacred mandate, really.
That's right. Our source material today is titled Islamic Judgment on Perjury, the Weight of False Witness. And what it does is it analyzes legal precedents that were established during the time of the Prophet Muhammad.
And we should be clear, this isn't just a dry exploration of legal code.
Not at all.
It's a look at the spiritual severity, the incredible weight assigned to one very specific transgression, the lie told under oath.
So the premise we're unpacking is, frankly, it's stunning in its severity. This historical source material, it doesn't just treat perjury as, a criminal offense against the court.
No, it puts it into a theological category that's, well, it's reserved for the absolute gravest of sins.
Okay, so let's unpack this right at the top. Because the central finding here is radical. It really demands our full attention.
It really does.
According to the judgments we're reviewing, a lie told in court, what we call false witness, is given an ethical weight equal to the greatest sin imaginable in the monotheistic worldview.
Precisely. These sources present this really shocking equivalence. A lie told deliberately to corrupt justice, maybe to steal property or to slander a reputation, is considered a sin as grave as associating partners with God, as grave as shirk, the worship of false idols.
In the same category. It's almost unbelievable.
It is.
So our mission today, then, is to understand why. Why is this seemingly, localized legal crime treated as a cosmic catastrophe?
We need to unpack the historical context of the ruling, the specific legal principles that came out of this judgment, and the profound reasoning, the ratio decidendi behind that equivalence.
We're really seeking to understand why this specific transgression, just lying about facts in a court of law, is considered a fundamental corruption of divine justice itself.
It's a mission to understand the absolute value that this formative legal system placed on the spoken word, especially when that word determines the fate of property, reputation, and sometimes even life.
And to do that, we're drawing specifically on the earliest recorded judgments, right? Traditions that you find in established collections like Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim.
Exactly. And they give us a direct, sort of unvarnished view into these formative moments of Islamic legal theory and practice.
Okay, so let's set the stage. Because to grasp the enormity of this judicial declaration, we first have to understand the specific, almost mundane circumstances that triggered it. We begin in the city of Madinah. And you have to picture this, it's probably in a setting that served as the communal gathering place, maybe the early mosque structure, which also functioned as the court.
Right. There's no marble courthouse with columns. This is the center of civic and spiritual life, all in one place.
And the incident itself, it wasn't some pre-planned revelation. It was triggered by a very ordinary, everyday property dispute.
Happens all the time.
A claimant appeared before the Prophet EU, who was acting as the presiding judge. And as was the custom, he brought along several witnesses to support his claim over a piece of land, or maybe some other tangible asset.
And this context is so crucial. We're in an era before, extensive legal documentation, before deeds and titles were universally standardized and recorded.
So the word of a witness was everything.
It was often the only determinant of justice. The entire structure of property rights, of transactional integrity, it all rested on the word of the witness. Their truthfulness was the bedrock of the system.
So the claimant brings his witnesses forward. They start to give their testimony, recounting the facts that they allegedly observed.
Standard procedure.
But what's fascinating here is the subtlety of the critical moment that's described in our source material. This wasn't a case where a witness just boldly and obviously fabricated a story from whole cloth.
Yeah, it was much quieter than that.
Yeah.
As the witnesses were giving their accounts, the narrative specifies that one particular witness hesitated.
Hesitated.
Yes. The term used suggests a faltering, a contradiction, or maybe just a moment of visible unease, a micro-expression of deceit that we might talk about today.
So what did he do?
He offered a detail that just didn't align, either with his own preceding statements or maybe with the testimony of the others. He contradicted himself. He sowed this tiny seed of doubt.
And the judge, the Prophet Bai, who was observing everything, he picked up on it immediately.
He recognized it instantly. And this is where his judicial restraint becomes a key teaching moment.
Right, because you'd think he'd jump in, stop him right there.
Exactly. But acting as the presiding judge, he didn't immediately interrupt. He didn't cut the witness off. He didn't declare a mistrial on the spot.
Why not? What's the significance of that silence?
That silent observation is absolutely key to understanding proper judicial temperament. He allowed the entire exchange to proceed. He let the witnesses finish their statements, even though he'd already detected a clear moral or factual lapse.
So he let the lie fully form.
He did. And this demonstrates a core principle. Justice requires not just detecting corruption, but patiently allowing for the full manifestation of that corruption. This ensures that the judgment, when it's delivered, is based on a complete understanding of the transgression.
It also seems like a very practical move. By letting the testimony run its course, it ensured there was no procedural defense for the liar.
That's a great point. They couldn't come back later and claim they were pressured or that they were interrupted and were about to correct themselves.
No, the false statement was freely and fully offered to the court.
Exactly.
So you have this tense courtroom drama playing out over a simple parcel of land. The witnesses complete their testimony. The dispute is just hanging in the air. And then comes this profound shift.
A huge shift. The discussion instantly moves from property lines and boundaries to eternal spiritual stakes.
It's no longer about the case.
No. The sources state that immediately after the testimonies concluded, the prophet turned not just to the parties involved, but to the entire assembled community. This was the shift from a ruling on a case to a teaching moment for the collective consciousness.
And the tone.
The sources describe it as a tone that shook hearts. That phrase alone indicates a gravity that completely transcended the specific dispute they were there to resolve.
So this emphasizes that the incident, the hesitating witness, it was just the catalyst. It wasn't the main focus.
Not at all. The true purpose was to deliver an absolute foundational truth about the vulnerability of the judicial system, about the foundation of societal trust itself. The stage was now set for a warning far greater than anything related to a mere property fine.
This was about the total collapse of shared truth.
When you think about it, that's what it is. When a lie threatens to be enshrined as legal truth, it creates a crisis of faith, a crisis in the entire system.
So the incident in Madinah teaches us that even the most seemingly small, mundane corruption, a little lie over a piece of land,
has monumental ethical implications. The judge's silent observation becomes the prelude to the most dramatic moral indictment imaginable.
And that indictment, that's the basis of our next section. Having shifted the focus away from the details of the property claim and onto the moral integrity of the court itself, the prophet Pray initiates an exchange. And this exchange just vaults the discussion from human law into the highest levels of theology and ethics.
It does. He poses a direct question to the whole assembly. And this exchange is perhaps the most documented, the most widely cited aspect of this entire legal precedent.
And it frames the crime of perjury not just as dishonesty.
No, it puts it in the context of ultimate morality. He asks them, "Shall I not tell you of the greatest of sins?"
A pretty arresting question.
You can imagine the silence in the room.
And the companions, naturally, they reply with great anticipation. They recognize the significance of what's about to be disclosed. They say, "Yes, O messenger of Allah."
So the first sin he names is, well, it's the logical and expected pillar of the entire monotheistic structure. He says, associating partners with Allah. Shirk.
Right. This is the ultimate non-negotiable betrayal of divine unity, of Tawheed. It's the fundamental spiritual error. It defines the relationship between the creation and the creator.
And shirk isn't just, worshiping a physical idol. In its broader sense, it means acknowledging any authority, any power, or any source of ultimate truth as being equivalent to or detracting from God's unique sovereignty.
So that sets the theological baseline. It's the absolute worst thing you can do. If shirk is the most fundamental cosmic betrayal, we expect the second sin to be something equally devastating to the human soul.
You're waiting for murder or something on that scale.
Exactly. But then comes this startling pivot, listed immediately alongside shirk is, and bearing false witness.
And if you just stop and consider the sheer gulf between those two acts.
It's huge.
The vast, abstract, philosophical crime of idolatry on one hand, and the seemingly pedestrian, practical crime of lying about a piece of property on the other. The equivalence is philosophically explosive.
So this pairing, this is the ratio decidendi made manifest. It forces the community to recognize that judicial integrity isn't just a matter of convenience.
It's a matter of ultimate theological integrity.
And the sources, they really drive home the intensity of this warning. It wasn't just a single statement made in passing.
No, not at all. The prophet Orapia II warning, bearing false witness, so many times and with such incredible emphasis.
To the point that the people there were uncomfortable.
They were. The companions were so struck by the intensity and the repetition, watching their guide become visibly distressed by the potential for this sin, that they later recorded saying, if only he would stop repeating it.
Wow. They wished he would stop because it was so intense.
It was so heavy. And that repetition, it performs two functions. The first is pedagogical, right? It hammers home the point that the human temptation to lie in court, to gain an advantage through verbal deceit, is so common and so destructive that it required repeated, severe emphasis to permanently etch it into the consciousness.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second function?
The second is theological. It confirms that the equivalence he's drawing is not hyperbole.
It's absolute truth.
It's absolute truth. He needed to ensure they grasped that a functional, just society is literally the terrestrial manifestation of Tawhid, of divine unity.
So let's perform the deep dive here. Let's get into the significance of pairing false witness with shirk. We have to move beyond that surface definition of shirk as just idol worship. We have to consider its impact on the divine attributes of Tawhid and Adl.
Yes. So when we talk about Tawhid, we're talking about God's sole sovereignty and truth. God is the ultimate reality.
Okay.
And when we talk about justice, Adl, we are referring to the divine attribute of maintaining balance and truth in the universe. False witness is an attempt by a created human being to subvert Adl, using a lie.
So you're introducing a falsehood into a system that's supposed to reflect divine truth.
Precisely. By deliberately attempting to legislate a false reality, to have the court declare a lie as the truth, the witness is, in effect, attempting to supplant God's truth, God's hack, with his own manufactured falsehood.
It's an act of legislative shirk.
That is the perfect way to put it. It's an act of usurping the divine domain. The witness denies God's exclusive authority to establish reality and justice.
And this is why the source material spells out the core rationale so explicitly. It defines a lie in the name of justice as, what was the phrase?
The three-part definition: treachery against Allah, the court, and the people.
That is an immensely powerful definition. Let's fully dissect that, the devastating scope of that crime.
Okay, so first, treachery against Allah. This is the spiritual betrayal we were just discussing. Justice, Adl, is considered an attribute of God. So when a witness swears to tell the truth, they are implicitly invoking the divine. They're assuming the role of an agent of truth.
Then when they lie,
they actively betray that divine trust. They are attempting to pervert God's decreed order justice for their own selfish benefit or for the benefit of another party. It's a direct rebellion.
Okay, that's the first part. What's the second? Treachery against the court.
Right. The court is the physical societal mechanism that is designed to deliver that divine justice. It relies entirely on the assumption that testimony is truthful and accurate.
A lie breaks the whole machine.
It renders the entire judicial structure impotent. It turns the judge, the jurists, the whole legal process into unwitting accomplices in an act of oppression. It's a direct attack on the rule of law itself. It paralyzes its function.
And the third part, treachery against the people.
This means the victim, of course, but also the community at large. False witness inevitably leads to the oppression of an innocent party. They lose their property, their rights, their security.
But it's bigger than just the one victim.
Oh, much bigger. It erodes the fundamental trust required for any society to operate. If citizens cannot rely on the truth being spoken in the seat of judgment, then the social contract dissolves. People lose faith in the system, and that leads to anarchy or vigilantism.
So the act of giving false witness, it takes this legal crime, the simple act of lying about facts, and it elevates it to a spiritual betrayal of the highest order.
Because it actively seeks to destroy the mechanism through which divine order is supposed to be maintained on earth. It's a comprehensive definition of corruption that attacks reality at its very source.
And this framework must have provided immense intellectual weight for the early jurists.
It did. It linked the most abstract theological concept, Tawhid, to the most practical societal function, the court. It showed that both idolatry and perjury are acts that deny the truth necessary for creation and community to exist harmoniously.
And this deep philosophical grounding, this is what necessitated the repetition and the emotional intensity that the companions observed.
Exactly. It wasn't an overreaction. It was a proportional theological response to an existential threat.
Okay, so we've established the enormous moral and spiritual weight of the lie. But let's move now to the practical side of things, the legal consequences.
The nuts and bolts.
Exactly. What was the immediate action taken following the exposure of that contradictory witness in Medina? And then how did this precedent transition into established codified law?
The judgment was decisive, and it operated on several levels. First and foremost, the procedural level. The false testimony invalidated the case entirely.
So the case is just dead in the water.
Completely. No ruling could be delivered based on a foundation of recognized falsehood. The claim that was supported by that witness was immediately dismissed, or at least that part of the evidence was deemed inadmissible.
Okay, that's the procedural consequence, but what about the person, the one who tried to corrupt the court?
The witness himself was declared sinful and punishable. And the sources emphasize that the immediate legal action involved a very powerful mechanism of deterrence.
Which was?
Public condemnation. The witness was called out openly before the entire assembly.
You have to think about what that means in that kind of society. A public condemnation in that socio-legal environment.
Yep.
That's arguably a fate worse than a short jail sentence.
Absolutely. It strips the individual of their reputation and, critically, their trustworthiness. That was their most valuable social capital.
So the penalty was designed to be social and lasting.
Exactly. It established an absolute red line. You corrupt the truth, and you corrupt your own standing within the community. Permanently. This was essential for maintaining the integrity of the judicial process, especially in a time when reliance on the moral uprightness of the individual was paramount.
And the social pressure of knowing the entire community recognized your treachery. That must have acted as a massive deterrent.
A huge deterrent.
So this one incident, it laid the groundwork for formalization. How did later jurisprudence take this ruling and codify it? Move it from a specific ruling by the prophecy to a universal legal principle?
The codification process involved defining specific categories of verbal offense. For instance, you have the general category of kazaf.
And what is cause?
Kazaf means false accusation or slander, and it particularly refers to accusations that damage a person's moral reputation, like accusing someone of adultery without proof. Kaf is a set, established penalty, a had, in certain circumstances.
So that's one category. And the offense of the lying witness.
That is precisely where shahadat al-zur comes in. This is a specific legal term for false testimony. It's distinct from kazvum because it involves deliberately providing false facts in a court setting with the intent to deprive someone of their financial, civil, or legal rights.
And based on this prophetic precedent.
Based on this precedent, shahadat al-zur was defined as a major offense, a kabira, which solidified its unique and incredible severity.
So shahadat al-zur became the immovable cornerstone of how the court handles admissible evidence.
Absolutely. This principle became central to the kanuni shahadat, which is the law of evidence, across various schools of Islamic jurisprudence. The foundational requirement for any testimony to be admissible is the unimpeachable moral and legal credibility of the witness.
This leads us to the crucial concept of adalat. Let's fully unpack what adalat required, because it sounds like it goes far beyond just don't lie when you're being watched.
Oh, much, much further. Adalat translates literally as justice or uprightness. For a witness, it demanded that the person testifying must possess a sustained moral credibility. They had to have a reputation for just character in their everyday life. It wasn't about a single performance in court.
So how would a judge know? What were the practical criteria? How did a court ensure a witness possessed adalat?
The jurists developed some very rigorous criteria for assessing it. A witness had to be known for fulfilling their religious duties, avoiding major sins, the kabair, and maintaining integrity in all their social dealings.
So their whole life was under scrutiny?
In a sense, yes. This meant having a reputation for honesty in financial transactions, being known for fairness toward their family, avoiding public immoralities. A judge might even secretly inquire about the witness's reputation in their neighborhood or among their business associates.
A kind of background check.
An informal but very serious one. If a witness was known for being a habitual liar, even in trivial matters outside of court, they lacked adalat. Their testimony was inadmissible before they even stepped up to the stand.
That makes the process of proving a false witness even more robust. So if you committed shahadat al-zur, you weren't just violating the oath.
You were violating your entire publicly recognized moral status.
Which brings us to the consequence. If you were proven to have committed Shahad al-Azur, the result was what?
Catastrophic. For the individual's legal standing, it was the end. The person permanently loses the status of an admissible witness. They are no longer considered an Adil Shahid.
Permanently losing the status of Adil Shahid. That is a severe and lasting legal penalty. We called it a form of civil death earlier. Why the permanence?
Because the crime demonstrated a fundamental and what was seen as an irredeemable failure of character, specifically regarding the most sacred of social duties, upholding the truth.
So the system's logic was that a person like that just can't be trusted again.
Exactly. The system believed that a deliberate liar, particularly one who tried to pervert justice for material gain, had proven themselves incapable of acting as an instrument of divine justice. So to commit Shahadat al-Zur meant you were forever barred from participating in future legal proceedings as a trustworthy source of evidence. Your word becomes legally worthless.
Now, I want to insert some nuance here. In a system of law that evolved over centuries, there must have been different interpretations on the, let's say, the physical consequence. The spiritual equivalence to shirk remained absolute, but did the practical tazir, the discretionary punishment, vary between legal schools?
That is an excellent question. It speaks directly to the development of jurisprudence. And you're right. While all the schools of law agreed on the spiritual severity and the permanent loss of adalat, the actual discretionary punishment, the tazir, did evolve and vary.
So what did that look like?
For example, some early jurists, particularly in the Hanafi school of law, suggested punishments that were aimed at maximal public humiliation and deterrence.
Oh, jazz.
Historical records mention penalties like lengthy imprisonment or public whipping, or even more symbolic things like the public shaving of the head and beard, followed by parading the individual through the marketplace.
So a goal was not just to punish, but to mark them.
Yes. The purpose was never merely retribution. It was total public degradation to ensure the community understood the depth of the betrayal. It was designed to eliminate the possibility of that person ever being trusted again. So the specific form of the punishment varied, but the intensity designed to mirror the gravity of the sin remained consistent. It had to be a punishment that publicly and permanently marked the liar.
This whole system, this combination of spiritual and physical consequences, creates a remarkably robust defense mechanism against judicial corruption, doesn't it?
It does. By making the penalty spiritual, social, and legal, it minimizes the incentive for anyone to even contemplate bearing false witness. The perceived gain just pales in comparison to the total permanent loss.
Okay, let's return to the philosophical core of this. We need to tie the legal action back to the spiritual mandate. We've established that the words of a witness carry this immense weight. Let's just reiterate that moral principle extracted from the sources. Why this extraordinary severity?
The sources fundamentally define the difference between just, regular speech and testimony given under oath. Words themselves are inherently sacred because they're the tools of reason, of communication.
The vehicle for revelation.
Exactly. But in a legal proceeding, when they are spoken under oath, they are transformed. They become divine evidence.
Divine evidence. That phrase links the mundane act of talking about property lines directly to the theological concept of haq.
Yes, and haq means both truth and reality. It's God's truth. So when you take an oath, you are invoking the ultimate source of reality. You are, in that moment, meant to be acting as God's instrument for establishing truth on earth.
So if justice is a divine mandate, then the facts used to execute that mandate have to be pure.
They must be. To lie in that critical moment is described in the sources as not just to deceive a man, it is to defy God. It's an act of, you might say, counter-creation. It's an attempt to fabricate a false reality that stands in opposition to the divine reality.
This framing is so critical, especially when we draw the comparison to modern justice systems, which of course also take perjury very seriously.
I do. In common law systems like those in the US, the UK, or Canada, we have very clear and serious perjury laws. Lying under oath is a felony. It's punishable by heavy fines, by lengthy imprisonment. So modern systems absolutely recognize that without truth, the judicial system simply cannot function.
So both the classical jurisprudence we're discussing and modern common law systems agree on the premise. Perjury is a serious threat to the state.
They agree on the threat, yes. But the crucial difference, according to our sources, is the philosophical motivation and the corresponding legal weight.
And that's the critical distinction.
It is. In modern common law, perjury is primarily treated as a crime against the state or against the court. It's a legal wrong. It's a procedural obstruction that undermines governmental authority, efficiency, and the integrity of the judicial process.
It's functional law. The punishment is there to protect the functionality of the system.
It is functional, exactly. Now contrast that with the classical Islamic jurisprudence we've been discussing. The offense is treated as not just a legal wrong against the court, it is fundamentally a spiritual betrayal.
Right.
By actively attempting to destroy divine justice on earth, the individual commits an act of treason against the highest possible authority. It is a refusal to comply with Tawhid through the failure of Evil. And this theological framing is what mandates the severity of equating it with idolatry.
This philosophical gulf is what makes that incident in Medina so profound. The severity of the punishment, that permanent social and legal death of being declared non-adil shahid. It's not an overreaction to the monetary damage caused by the property dispute.
Not at all. It is a proportional response to the spiritual damage done by betraying the foundational principle of truth. The system is fundamentally stating, if we tolerate a known lie in the process of justice, we are demonstrating that we value human manipulation and selfishness over the divine command.
And that is an existential threat, not just a procedural one.
An existential threat to the community's integrity.
Okay, I think our well-informed listener is going to have a question here. A necessary intellectual hurdle we need to address. How did early jurists manage the risk that this extreme severity might actually paralyze the courts?
That's an essential critical question.
Right. If lying could result in spiritual death and total social ruin, wouldn't people be terrified to testify in complex, ambiguous cases, even when they were trying their best to tell the truth?
It speaks to the very practical nature of jurisprudence, and they absolutely thought about this. The system addressed it by making a very clear distinction between deliberate malice and genuine human error.
Okay.
Shahad al-Zur explicitly refers to false testimony that is given knowingly and intentionally to achieve an unjust outcome. If a witness genuinely misremembers a date or misidentifies a landmark and they correct themselves, or they're proven wrong without malicious intent, that is not Shahad al-Zur.
So the severity only applies to the malicious, conscious attempt to substitute falsehood for truth, not to the inevitable human fallibility that comes with memory.
Precisely. The standard for proving Shahad al-Zur was exceptionally high. It often required that the witness be caught in an irrefutable, demonstrable contradiction, or that they later confess to having lied. This focused the severe penalty only on the deliberate traitors to the system.
Which in turn would actually encourage honest witnesses to come forward.
Yes, knowing that a genuine error would not lead to an accusation of committing the greatest sin.
This brings us to the ultimate aha moment for our listener, I think. The severity of the punishment is directly and inextricably tied to the perceived sacrosanct nature of truth in a system where justice itself is viewed as a divine mandate.
That's it. The legal system is structured to protect not just property, but the metaphysical foundation upon which property rights and all other rights rest.
So that's the takeaway. The system demands that the individuals who participate in justice must be instruments of pure truth, or the entire edifice just falls apart.
The weight of the word is equal to the weight of the foundation it is supporting. And if that foundation is sacred, the act of undermining it must carry the highest possible penalty.
It provides a powerful and I think often overlooked lens through which to view all testimony. Every word spoken under oath is a moment of profound spiritual and legal reckoning.
It forces you to consider the ultimate stakes of integrity. When we examine legal systems today, while we penalize perjury, we rarely frame it in such cosmic terms. This historical precedent offers a powerful ethical challenge to us. Are we prioritizing the functional efficiency of the court or the ultimate moral integrity of the testimony?
This has been an intensely revealing deep dive, a look into the philosophy and the practice of early Islamic law. Let's just briefly review the central components we've extracted from the sources today.
We began with that seemingly simple anecdote from Madinah, a property dispute that led to a hesitating witness.
Which then resulted in an immediate, profound intervention by the Prophet.
And that intervention established the radical equation, placing the crime of false witness directly alongside the sin of idolatry, shirk.
Underscoring that both corrupt the fundamental order. One is spiritual, tawhid, and the other is societal, etol.
Then we discussed the immediate and lasting legal principles, the requirement of public condemnation for deterrence,
and the eventual comprehensive codification of Shahadat al-Zur. And crucially, we analyzed that permanent consequence for the lying witness, the loss of admissibility and legal credibility, the status of Adil Shahid.
And finally, that essential philosophical distinction that perjury here is not merely a crime against the state. It is a fundamental spiritual betrayal.
Treachery against Allah, the court, and the people, all designed to destroy the very structure of divine justice on earth. The extreme severity is proportionate to the sanctity of the foundation it attacks.
The deep dive has thus shown us the immense, sacred responsibility placed on the spoken word when it is under oath. If truth is the non-negotiable foundation of the legal system, then the destruction of that truth is inherently the ultimate act of social and spiritual corruption.
That is a powerful lesson in judicial and moral philosophy, particularly in how absolute truth is valued.
And it leaves us with one final thought, a thought based on the profound implications of this source material. We focus so heavily on the witness who lied, the person who committed the great sin. But if the weight of the lie is considered the gravest of sins, if it's an act that actively corrupts divine justice, what does the source material implicitly suggest about the duty of the judge?
That burden must be staggering.
The judicial duty in discerning the truth. The vigilance required to spot that hesitation or that contradiction. That burden must be impossibly high when the consequence of a bad judgment, one based on a known lie, carries the spiritual weight of facilitating a societal shirk.
The judge is responsible not just for the property in the case,
but for the soul of the community.
Something for you to consider as you reflect on the structure of justice. If the lie is that heavy, how much heavier is the responsibility of the one tasked with exposing it and ensuring that truth and only truth prevails?
Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.
We'll see you next time.